There's actually a lot of really neat overlap between what people have been doing to study language in humans and what people have been using to study language in language models. And I mean, that continues to this day. There's some cool work with developmental psychology trying to figure out what ChatGPT can do using tests that we actually used on infants,
Really?
decades ago. Yeah.
And how does that stack up? Do we know?
So it turns out that ChatGPT has some problems with reasoning. It doesn't reason the same way that a child does, but it actually, adults actually don't reason the same way other children do, which is also kind of fun.
So we've been trying to get away from multiple choice questions?
You can think back to the tests we were talking about. They are multiple choice questions. And of course, we love multiple choice questions because they're easy to grade, but they can be really restrictive. What we would prefer to have is to have the language model actually answer with words.
Yeah.
And so new tests were developed where the language model had to, actually answer a question, an actual question with words. So the way these tests work is that the language model is given some context. So like a sentence or a short paragraph, kind of like from Wikipedia is a great example. Actually, a lot of the original tests were built by scraping stuff out of Wikipedia. So the language model is given a little bit of context, like a couple sentences from Wikipedia, and then a question. And then the language model has to answer. The original form of this task was that the answer was a word or two in the context.
Okay.
An example would be, in meteorology, precipitation is when condensed atmospheric water vapor falls under gravity. It's kind of a mouthful, but remember, we're scraping from Wikipedia. And a question could be, what causes precipitation to fall? And if you remember back, the answer is gravity. And so that answer, that word itself actually appears in the context. And so the task for the language model is sort of to highlight that word in the context in order to answer the question.
Okay. So the answer is within the information you gave them, and it has to find it out in that larger sentence.
Yeah. And so this was a huge data set created. It's called the SQUAD data set. And it, received a lot of excitement and interest because it was, this new task, question answering, where the language was from Wikipedia, so it's often quite technical. And so a lot of the questions were, difficult.
How good are they at going through that context and finding the correct answer?
Current language models are about 90%, which, is about as well as people could do on the task.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be impressed by that number now, but
because I tricked you previously.
Yeah, is it good?
Well, so one of the drawbacks is that the task is to find the word in the context that answers the question. But if the question is unanswerable given the context, the language model has no way to say that, no way to communicate that to the user. So they had to go back and redo this data set in order to create unanswerable questions so that the language model, instead of saying, if you asked it like, what's the capital of Syria, but we had like the context was the thing about precipitation, it would have to choose a word, right?
So it needed to answer, and it couldn't say.
It couldn't say, I don't know. Which that might be hard to believe given how often Alexa probably tells you, I'm sorry, I don't know that one.
I get that one a lot.
Yeah, it happens a lot. But believe it or not, that was hard to get language models to do, to say, I don't know. So they went back and they redid the data set and they put in unanswerable questions. So for every one of the contexts, they would include some questions where the answer did not appear in the context. And it actually took a while for people to get AI to perform well again. It took about 2 years to conquer that task, which I think tells you how hard it is to get a language model to understand when it doesn't know.